Obese people have higher risks for diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, and injuries in car accidents. Yes, in part because they're far less likely to wear a seat belt. That's the finding of a study out of the University of Buffalo that will be presented at an upcoming meeting of the Society for Academic Emergency Medicine in Chicago. The researchers analyzed data in the National Fatality Analysis Reporting System of the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The study included 1/3 of a million drivers involved in fatal crashes. 2 years ago, the research group found that morbidly obese people were 56% more likely to die in a car crash than normal-weight car occupants. The new study revealed that drivers of normal weight are 67% more likely to wear a seat belt than are obese drivers, which could account for at least part of the increased death risk.
It's tough to pick a familiar face out of a crowd, but focusing on a known voice in a noisy room is easy. And a new study scanned volunteers' brains to look at how we solve the so-called cocktail party problem. The work is in the journal Nature. Researchers recorded the activity of the subjects' cerebral cortexes while playing them sentences spoken by different voices. First, the subjects listened to individual sentences and reported key features of each one. Then, they heard 2 different sentences played at the same time, but had to listen to and recall details from only one voice. Each voice drew a particular response from the auditory cortex. And even with an extra sentence playing simultaneously, researchers saw that the cortex responded specifically to the voice that the subject was focusing on. This finding indicates that our brains process sound based not only on the audio input they receive, but also on our listening goals. And it could lead to speech recognition systems that are accurate in crowds, even at a cocktail party. The researchers tracked traffic on a highway in one area and found that many fewer cars were on the road on the 13th. Perhaps due to people being leery of driving on that day. But hospital admissions in that area due to traffic accidents was actually higher. 45 people were admitted on the 6th, but 65 people were admitted on the 13th. The researchers concluded that a few people were indeed unlucky on that Friday the 13th. In that part of England. Then again, what you really needed for this study was a control group that stays home, only to slip in the bathtub.
Asteroid collisions can be, just ask the dinosaurs, but they also bring key ingredients for life. Super-Earths can draw them to nearby worlds. Super-Earths, planets that are up to 10 times more massive than Earth, might play billiards with planetary systems. New simulations suggest that if a super-Earth existed in our own solar system, say between Venus and the Earth, far more asteroids would collide with us. But that isn't necessarily a bad thing, if the timing is right. Understanding the effect of these massive planets on others nearby could help direct the search for life on exoplanets.
We have had a big problem traditionally, and that we know a lot about how they move around the forest. I've been out to the forest and spent a year recording the different types of locomotion they use, but we have no idea about the energetic cost of how they move around the forest, and the solutions that they find to problems of moving around the canopy. And what we're doing here is using the park, or athletes as an analogy for a large-bodied ape moving around a complex environment, and getting them to move around in the course that we've made that they've never seen before, and we're going to record their energetic expenditure while they're doing it. I'm going to argue that the tremendous increases in productivity that we associate with the Industrial Revolution originate not so much from changes in science or technology or new inventions, where England was far from unique, as from changes in attitudes towards morality, towards what constituted the good, attitudes towards property, which became in England individuals long before it did on the continent, attitudes toward the proper role of government, and together, these attitudes constitute much of what the Luddites were protesting against.
Another arm of the United States government was the FSA, the Farm Security Administration, and they had a peculiar task, because in addition to the Depression, which had obviously hit farmers quite hard because suddenly the material that they were producing wasn't really as value, yet their costs for producing it were exactly the same, they were hit not only that but also by another problem, which was the Dust Bowl, and the Dust Bowl was this terrible broad that hit the American West End, Southwest especially, and caused terrible economic problems for those farmers.
Popular ride-sharing firm Uber has had its license to operate in London revoked in a surprise move by the city's regulator. There were multiple reasons for the decision. TfL cited the company's approach to reporting criminal offences. In August, a senior officer within London's Metropolitan Police Service wrote to TfL about a Barcelonist to report a passenger's accusation that her driver had sexually assaulted her. TfL said it was also concerned about how Uber obtained medical certificates and criminal records checks for drivers. The straw that broke the camel's back may have been the company's Greyball software, an internal application that Uber may have used to block regulators' oversight of the Uber app.
When sweetened condensed milk was invented in the 1800s, the original reason for adding sugar to the milk was not for flavor, but for protection against spoilage. And it works even after you open the can. Sweetened condensed milk keeps longer than fresh milk. That added sugar kills bacteria that would otherwise digest the milk and spoil it. The sugar kills not by poisoning the bacteria, but by a more direct physical process. It draws water out of the bacteria so the bacterial cells shrivel and die. Each bacterial cell has a sort of skin, technically, a membrane. Water can pass through this membrane pretty easily, but substances dissolved in the water can't. Water has a natural tendency to move toward any region where there's a high concentration of dissolved substances. A bacterial cell in a can of sweetened condensed milk finds itself immersed in an extremely concentrated solution of sugar. Water inside the cell will, therefore, pass out through the cell membrane into the sugar solution. The bacterial cell dehydrates and dies in a sea of sugary water.
The billowy white stuff is what the steam turns into when it hits the drier, cooler air of your kitchen. Those white billows are, in fact, clouds, not steam. In many ways, they are identical to the clouds you can see in the sky. The white color comes from tiny liquid water droplets that have condensed from the steam. More accurately, these billows are a type of cloud called a mixing cloud. These can form when separate air masses with different temperatures and different amounts of water in them mix together. In the case of your kettle, the hot, steamy gas cools rapidly in the kitchen air, and this sudden coolness is what makes some of the vapor condense. Mixing clouds are pretty common, and they don't need to start with steam. You see mixing clouds when you see your breath on a cold winter day. You'll find them rising from a bowl of warm soup. Wherever there's a mixing cloud, you can bet some warm, moist air is mixing with air that's cooler and drier.
The word solstice means sun standing in Latin. It marks the point when the sun stops at its most northerly or southerly point, relative to the equator. Before reversing direction, the summer solstice, the sun would appear at its highest point in the sky, and is the day with the longest period of daylight. It happens twice a year, once in both the northern and southern hemispheres. The summer solstice in the northern hemisphere occurs around the 21st of June, but it does not always occur on this day, as it all depends on when the sun reaches its northernmost point from the celestial equator. It can happen between the 20th to the 22nd of June. Around this time in areas north of the Arctic Circle, it is possible to witness the sun not set at all, so dubbed Land of the Midnight Sun for this very reason. This occurs because the Earth's rotational axis is tilted. The Earth rotates around an axis inclined at an angle of 23.5 degrees in relation to its orbital plane around the Sun. It is this tilt that gives us our seasons. Summer occurs in the hemisphere that is tilted towards the Sun, whilst winter falls on the hemisphere that is tilted away from the Sun.
Electricity can be created in three main ways. The most common is through electromagnetic conversion, where electricity is generated by moving an electric conductor, like wires, inside magnetic field. The most practical example of this is a generator connected to a turbine. The turbine provides the motion required to move the conductor in the generator. This energy for motion can come from various technologies. For example, wind turbines, hydro, or the steam created from heat produced in nuclear fission or coal combustion. Electricity can also be created through a chemical reaction. An example of this is a battery or fuel cell. Finally, electricity can be created through solid-state conversion, where electricity is generated using the structure and properties of a solid. A specially constructed solid consists of different molecules packed closely together to create an electric current when stimulated. An example of a technology that utilizes solid-state conversion is a solar PV cell. It is important to note that electricity is the same regardless of how it is produced. So, the electricity generated from an electromagnetic generator is the same as that from a battery.
Certain types of wasps prey on fruit flies by injecting eggs inside fruit fly larvae. Unless an infected larva kills the wasp egg, it hatches and the wasp larva eats its way out from inside the fruit fly larva, killing it. One way for fruit fly moms to protect against this gruesome fate is to lay their eggs in an alcohol-soaked environment, such as fermenting fruit, when they see that parasitic wasps are around. Although alcohol is toxic to fruit flies, it's even more toxic to wasps, which, unlike fruit flies, have not evolved a high level of alcohol tolerance. So, if the larvae eat enough alcohol-rich food, it can kill the wasp egg and keep it from hatching. Apparently, fruit flies are not the only fly species to use alcohol to protect their young. In fact, it seems that most flies that eat rotting fruit use the alcohol defense against wasps. So, fruit flies are not unique in this regard, but they're still mighty impressive.
Humans are pretty lucky with the way we can communicate. Unlike animals, we have the perfect length necks and excellent control of our breaths. Both of these characteristics allow us to form words. Although animals can't talk like us, they still have special ways to communicate. For example, dolphins have one of the most sophisticated forms of communication. They make distinct whistling sounds that help identify themselves. Dolphins may also squeak or yelp depending on the situation. Nevertheless, each sound releases meaningful information. You have probably heard some birds say words just like us, but they are merely repeating what they hear. Most birds communicate through songs and squawks that can be beautiful for us to listen to. Other animals communicate without making a sound. Elephants show affection by wrapping their trunks around each other, whales leap out of the water to send messages to their friends, bees perform a special dance when they have located nectar in a tree.
Lead-in time is the amount of time that elapses between a business placing an order with a supplier for more stock or raw materials and the delivery of the goods to the business. Businesses want the lead time to be as short as possible, so that they can meet their customer orders and minimize the time between paying for the stock and receiving the feedback from the customer. However, this may not happen due to a number of factors, such as delays in the supplier receiving the order, or the breakdown of the supplier's lorries delivering the stock to the business.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My theme for this session is Convergence Technology Change and Business Practice. This is somewhat dear to my heart, in that I have spent much of the last 15 years involved in various aspects of technology and their impact on business, across a broad spectrum, from applications of signal processing in manufacture right through to the use of utilization data and diary applications, to improve the time utilization of the sales force.
There's also the wildlife and workers poisoned by all that fumigation. Add to that habitat destruction, where floral plantations displace native forest and wetlands. Finally, there's the refrigeration needed to keep those blooms fresh. The electricity is often produced by burning fossil fuels, and the refrigerant gases also exacerbate climate change. A more sustainable and, possibly, more romantic approach is to go with flowers certified by outfits like Veriflora, or even better, whatever flowers are in season locally. Of course, that's not much help for those of us in wintry climes.
Palm oil is the most widely produced oil crop currently. It's used in a wide range of industries, including food for biofuels and in soaps and shampoo. However, those sectors growing fast, and unfortunately palm oil grows in exactly the same environment as tropical rainforest. So, the use and the development of palm oil, the growth in the sector, is leading to wide-scale deforestation. What we are hoping to do is if we can come up an alternative we can slow the growth of the sector, and therefore stop the wide-scale deforestation in South Asia. You know, without getting into the details of exactly how that happened or how she got it out, let's just say it was a bad situation, and she panicked because, like for many of us, her phone is one of the most used and essential tools in her life. But, on the other hand, she had no idea how to fix it, because it's a completely mysterious black box. So, think about it. What would you do? What do you really understand about how your phone works? What are you willing to test or fix? For most people, the answer is nothing. In fact, one survey found that almost 80% of smartphone users in this country have never even replaced their phone batteries, and 25% didn't even know this was possible.
You've heard about SARS, AIDS, and bird flu. Now researchers from Australia claim we're about to be hit by a new epidemic, motivational deficiency disorder. According to the British Medical Journal, 1 in 5 people are said to suffer from motivational deficiency disorder, or MODD, and most don't even know they have it. Symptoms include being unable to get out of bed in the morning, being trapped on the couch,